All right, welcome everybody to another show, episode number 19. We're talking renewals and go to market today. Brad Davis, founder and host of Success Panda. We got a good panel today. Gentlemen, you want to say hello and make a quick intro of who you are? We'll start with Scott, then Sean, then Ryan. So
Okay, good.
go ahead, Scott.
Hey, everybody. My name is Scott Massey. I'm a consultant for a company called Renewalverse, and have been in customer success for a long time, 10 or so years. Ran the customer success meetup here in San Francisco, and then pivoted to a managing director role where I was running go-to-market for APAC and EMEA for a company. So I thought it would be an awesome subject to talk about.
It is. So, I mean, if renewal is in your title and what you do, I guess you're at the right
Yeah,
place, Scott.
yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Sean Dower. I started my career as an account manager myself and moved all the way up to a VP of customer success throughout my time. Renewals go to market, one of my favorite parts of the job. So glad to be here.
Glad you're here, Sean.
And Ryan Schultz here, founder and CEO of Divix, stands for Digital Value and Customer Success. I started my history with actually building applications. So I have a computer science and math degree for the first 7 to 8 years of my career. Then switched over to what some people would say is the dark side once I went to the technology side and actually managing customer success. I was a CSM actually to start. Moved my way up to a VP while I was working throughout Okta, Drift, and a few other companies. Ran global renewals, global customer success, and decided to start my own business. So continuing the trend of change and redefining myself at every step of the way. And excited to be here, Brad. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Ryan. And I lost $5 on a bet of having to understand what DivX stood for. So I'm already $5 out. So
it's a good conversation starter, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes sense, and you gotta, it's lucky, we have the vowels there. So
Yeah.
without those, it's always a guesswork, right? Cool. Well, today we're talking renewals, go to market. So it should be a fun and robust conversation. Our format is always just, we do have some questions we want to talk about, but it just kind of, we go where the wind blows us, right? So a lot of good things going on right now with customer success. Some quick housekeeping with Success Panda. If you haven't headed over to successpanda.io, you can create your free account and you can find your mentors and all the things. Oh, my voice is going out. All the things that you need to succeed in your professional development. And we're happy to have you join us for free over there. So if you don't have an account, check it out. Create an account today. And so today, we have a lot of very senior people, which is not always the case when we have these calls. So this should be interesting. So sometimes we like to get someone more junior to get a perspective of it, but that's not today because you all have been either founders or VPs and leading it. So we'll probably talk more about your experience leading these go-to-market teams or renewals teams, because I know that that's some unique experience that we can share. So, all right. Why don't we jump in? First thing is, Scott, why don't you tell me what's been your most recent experience in go-to-market and renewals, and what do you see that's changed in 2024? This past year there's been a lot of change. So let's talk about change in the last year, if any, with the CS role and then the go-to-market role. What have you seen?
So I think that obviously there's a lot of flux in tech and customer success. I think there's a bunch of emerging technology. I'm trying not to be the first to say those two letters. I can't do it.
You can just refer to it as the thing. Like Harry Potter when we're talking about Voldemort, right? Him who should not be named.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of emergent technologies coming out and a lot of ideas about how to implement different things. I think that that's also with kind of the big reset that's gone on in tech in general. Like it's these two sort of tectonic plates that are really
Mhm.
customer success from demand and for new customer success managers, but also how leaders think about building out a team. So I think that I mean, you said we're all senior, which I took as a compliment, not that we're all old. But
Nice.
I think that there's like fundamental
Yeah.
stuff that still remains true, that is important to talk about and be part of any organization that's growing despite whatever is happening at the moment. But yeah, there's definitely a trend towards how do we figure out how to use different tools and integrate them into our products or integrate them into our customer workflows and interactions and stuff that can better help revenue. And I think that sort of is tied to customer success. Hopefully those two are somehow related.
Gotcha. What are you seeing, Sean, in your time in renewals or go to market?
What I
What's
think is
any
interesting.
changes?
Well, what I think is interesting is it used to be, don't let clients leave. Right? That was the thought process. Keep them here, keep them happy, fix their problems, be happy. And that's not the case anymore. It's more, let's help them be successful. And then they'll stay. That's how they'll renew. We make their business better. It's funny. One of our guys used to do a lot of planning with the 2-letter word.
Mhm.
He loved the
I like
scripting
this.
from there.
Can
He
we make this
loved,
a thing?
getting scripting that you could clearly tell is from there. And it took a
Yeah.
lot of that to change that. I don't like that we use that sometimes as a crutch. I think it's about thoughtfulness. I don't think that's always the case. I think we have to keep that in mind. Looking into the next 5-10 years, it's a tool. It's not the end all be all. It's not going to take over. Like, that's important to understand.
Yeah. So I have to interject here because I have to share my most recent AI. I said Voldemort. Okay, I said the AI. So I guess we're cleared to say the rest of the call. But I was trying to so I was talking to UHC, so I'll just call them out. It's just UHC. I was trying to call UHC, United Healthcare, because I had a question, which was for my dental plan, do I have to wait every 6 months before I'm allowed to get my second cleaning of the year? So this was the question, right? So my customer journey was first Google, didn't give me anything. My policy is 81 pages. I'm not going to read through it. I go log online. I go to their chat bot. I ask it the question. It doesn't know, and it refers to me a phone number to a different department. I call the phone number and I talk to a human, and they tell me within 30 seconds.
Yep.
So, like, the whole AI being ubiquitous and solving, a lot of, I mean, I heard UHC has a little bit of money, but I mean, it's just like, not to dog on them too much, but it was just like, it just would have been, I would have saved 10 minutes of my life. I just would have called the line and just interacted with the human. So I think it's just interesting because people keep talking about AI because I guess people have to have something to talk about and we need a shiny thing at every one moment. But it's like, when are we going to deploy this at the enterprise level? Right. And, there's that whole conversation about that. But I mean, can we get the chat bots? Can we get that? Because I thought that was like the major use case. So there's my rant about that. So, but yeah, Ryan, what do you think? What are you seeing, Ryan? Anything new?
Well, I think it's interesting that even the title of this, you separate renewals and go to market. So I'll start with that. Because I just see renewals as a core part of go to market. In terms of the problems that are being solved with new technologies, you've unleashed the AI word, so I'm going to use it now. We're not solving problems that are new problems with it. yet, I'd say. I think and this has been like, to me, technology in general over the last, as long as I've been using it and experiencing it, you're building efficiencies and processes and using technology to deliver things in business that were traditionally done, whether it be by paperwork, by human, by, some kind of system, then by some workflow processing. And now you're on, to AI. And I see a lot of point solutions out there. Is kind of what I've seen is a lot of people are throwing like this little point solution that solves this little problem that's connecting, one system to another, and then trying to do some decision making and maybe acting on it. And, I'll add the agentic portion into there by acting on whatever data that they've pulled. But I don't feel like I fundamentally have seen anything change other than the number of people that are in jobs that are helping take care of our customers or the processes in which we're doing. And I feel like that was a little bit early for people cutting back on staffing and caring for their customers. I feel like we've bought into this hype now that AI can do a lot for us, but I don't think we really know how yet very efficiently. And that's kind of what I've seen is there's a bunch of these point solutions that are yet to be proven, that are very new to the market, that are still proving out processes. And I still think that there is a huge opportunity to figure out how they're going to get tied together, how they're actually going to solve different problems within these businesses. The area in which I've seen the most progress is actually in development. So like when I look at a business, how you differentiate your business, it's no longer on building a product that is unique, because somebody could catch up very quickly by the coding agents and other things that are out there that can help you build product. To me, the differentiation is how you market yourself, and how you solve certain problems. And the other one is really your customer experience. Those are the two biggest things that I think you can use to differentiate your business in this modern day. And everything else in between is people are going to be catching up constantly, whether it's a brand new idea or not. Somebody else could probably develop it pretty quick to catch up. So I think the marketing and the customer experience are critical in any business that's looking to survive in today's markets as they continue to solve problems.
Yeah, I would throw in community into that too. But go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, there's like a Peter Drucker quote that I like a lot, that like any organization has two jobs, and that's innovation and marketing, and I think of like the dream of customer success is that we think of the customer experience as innovation too, as like an integral part of the product. So we're using whatever tools to make sure we're getting outcomes, but also just basic customer service. And and I think those are like the two key parts of how customer success is supposed to innovate alongside the product.
Scott, I'd actually like to chime in on that one. So like you talked about the customer service piece, which I would probably associate with support. And then you talked about driving towards an outcome, which a lot of organizations would probably classify as professional services. Like you have an onboarding team that's going to get there. I always classified customer success as kind of some of the things that happened during maybe that onboarding stage, but then also what continued beyond delivering some of those initial outcomes and making sure that there was a bigger journey that went alongside to it. What are your thoughts on just like the onboarding, the support, and then how the customer success journey works beyond?
Yeah, my role when I was most successful at customer success, it was when I had the ability to build an ecosystem, and I oversaw support and documentation and onboarding, and sort of was able to affect the entire customer journey, which I think ultimately, like, we have this, the us and the company and the customer have this shared kind of responsibility to achieve value, and you do it together. And the goal of me and customer success is to put the pieces in place to ensure that outcomes happen at scale and value is recognized, for as many customers as possible. So I think that, I think of like professional services as part of that. I also think of like the healthcare experience that Brad talked about. Like, ideally there's like a customer success person or leader in there somewhere that's able to recognize, these questions aren't getting answered, and I think like value is not just in terms of outputs, but it is in terms of like the experience all along the way too.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Anybody who's ever worked in like small startup companies, you've ever stood up a greenfield project for a customer success project, you're the founding CSM or you're the first time director or whatever. I've done that a couple times, and it's like you take for granted the fact that you can move quickly and you have clear definition of what the customer journey looks like. And some of the shows that we've had like digital customer success shows, and one of the cool questions that is always interesting to kick around is who's in charge of communicating with the customer, right? And posing that same question to like the renewals and the go-to-market team, and I want to talk about too also what Ryan said, how we separated those out, in the title for this. Yeah, they're all under the umbrella of the go-to-market, but we're have some separate renewals questions later. But the question I want to hear from you guys is like, when it comes to go-to-market teams, which we have talked about, how I think Scott said that they've kind of been expanding, and Ryan, you mentioned that there are more people that were coming in. How do we like make sure that our messaging is going well, and like who's talking to the customer? Is there any one person that owns the customer relationship? Because 2 weeks ago I had somebody on a show, and they said that they worked at a company and they came in as a digital customer success, I think VP or director, and they found out they were sending 5 welcome emails. So I mean, we laugh, but it's just like, I feel like sometimes there can be too many cooks in the kitchen. There's kind of diffusion of responsibility, or just who knows what's going on. So, I mean, what do you think? I'll post that out, and Sean, you can go first. So to be clear on the question, in the GTM, who's responsible for, communicating with the customer? Is it a team sport? And what have you seen? Feel free to share horror stories, because we like those too, or success stories.
Ideally, the CSM is the quarterback of the team. That's how I look at it. They're the quarterback. They distribute the ball where it needs to go.
Right.
They talk to support. They talk to product. They talk to whoever. They're the window into the company. That's how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's never how I've seen it. Everywhere I go, it's support jumps in. Or one place I was at, we sent out emails every step of the way with welcome. And to be honest, it was worse because they had spelling wrong on half these emails.
Oh, snap.
Like one of them, it was the last place I was at was a branding company, and they wanted you to build your own artwork. Well, they spelled Van Gogh wrong. You don't have to be Van Gogh, and it's spelled wrong. Right. So like things like that, like the communication isn't good from other departments a lot of the time. It's very siloed, and that becomes a problem. Everybody's trying to pinpoint the problem on their part of the journey without talking about the journey together as a whole. And I think that's the problem that we see a lot, is that we're all trying to solve a problem. Everybody's trying to do the right thing, but we're not talking to each other.
Are they though?
Sorry, I think so. I would hope so. Right? Like, I know I want to.
Yeah. No,
it's funny because my wife is a VP of internal communications for a PEO company. And so when I have her look at stuff with me, because she knows how to write better than I'll ever know how to write.
Right.
She's like, this makes no sense. Why did all 5 of these emails go out?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer, but her opinion means everything.
So yeah, so in your experience, you've seen a lot of different hands, in the customer cookie jar. Which, yeah. What do you think, Scott? What's been your experience with go-to-market teams and communicating with customers?
Yeah, I think it changes as you scale, of course. But I think that if ultimately if customer success is accountable for outcomes and renewal, and growth and those kind of things, then it needs to be very much the sort of like what Sean said, the quarterback in giving feedback to all teams why that's not happening. You know, if I'm the one that's going to be going into the renewal conversations, I want to be able to explain why or why not there, you know, the customer is or isn't getting value out of it. But I do think that like one of the, I've been in situations where I've taken on too much in trying to handle all of the comms, you know, and I think they're,
Hmm.
you know, customer success is like an organizational mission. And so I do think that, you know, we're accountable for outcomes, but we can't be responsible for all of them. And that requires, you know, collaboration. And I think
Right.
customer success, their real job is being able to like not just say here's a bug or here's a problem, but being able to give the different teams actionable kind of strategic direction on where to head with, you know, marketing or whatever.
Yeah. So if I heard you correctly, Scott, it's almost like you're saying that if you're responsible for a KPI, you should have the power to be able to affect the inputs of that KPI.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Yes.
All right. News flash for a couple people I know. But anyways, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. This is I think it's a very interesting question because I think every organization would give you a different answer potentially. And you talked about 5 emails being sent out. I laugh a little bit because I could see a world where that's actually okay. It depends on who you're emailing though. So, you know, if you have somebody that's going to own the delivery of a project and you're emailing them and welcoming them to schedule it, that's different than, hey, thank you for buying and welcome to the post-sale purchase or process. And if you have somebody who would interact with support, maybe an individual contributor who's talking to support. So like there's a world where I think creating a personalized experience for the individual in which you're working with is actually not bad. You also have to be very careful. I liked how kind of Scott framed it about KPIs, and I agree with the quarterbacking to a degree. Some of the things that I've seen work best though is you clearly understand the roles and divisions of the different people who are going to be interacting with the customer. So, you know, when I was at Okta, like we had an AE who was the account owner. And when we say account owner, it doesn't mean that they're going to own every conversation. It doesn't mean they're going to send welcome you, all those things. It meant they were the commercial, contractual, responsible party for any upsell, for any net new contract, for those types of things. So with that executive buyer where they've already built rapport, they are the ones that are going to be introducing the other people into the conversation, because now they're introducing the CS team and the different teams in to say, hey, I built this relationship with this person. They bought for this reason. And then here you guys are going to be to deliver on the outcomes, but also identify new ones that are coming. So I think you have to have a clear understanding of like the responsibilities of each teams. And if you don't look at go-to-market as a overall function with aligned goals, you're going to end up in a siloed position, which I see a lot of organizations get into where, you know, all of a sudden sales has their thoughts, marketing has theirs, CSM has theirs. And then you see 5 emails going to the same person to welcome them, as opposed to working together on what those outcomes are. So I agree in the nature that a quarterback needs to be in control of delivering the outcomes to those customers and working with them. I also think you need to be very transparent with the customer where they can have visibility into what those KPIs and deliverables are, and they should be in the customer's language, not your own as a vendor. But most of all, like break the silos down. Do not let who's responsible for what get in the way of you working together and being a unified approach to go to market and working with your customer. That is the only way it works. Because if you try to start defending or fending for budget in each of the different departments, and this is where some of the leadership stuff gets, they're going to pressure test you to try to divide the money up and say, you guys need to learn to work together. And if you start on the wrong side of that, you're going to get yourself in a hole where you're having to diminish your value that you can provide out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that like to tag on to that, Ryan, I think that like and we all, I think we all kind of come from somewhat technical backgrounds. In my experience, the fastest, easiest way to renew with customers is, and I've worked mainly with technical products, so it might be different for others, but there has to be someone that's the subject matter expert and also understands what the customer is trying to do. And I think, if you lack the ability to understand like what the customer's desired outcomes are, and being able to technically make that happen, alongside the customer, like that makes renewal to me like exponentially easier. It's not necessarily a dedicated like sales strategy, but if you're the one that's if you're solving problems for the customer on a repeatable basis, and you're able to connect with the customer about what's the pain that they're encountering in their world, like that just, to me, it's a much better approach than, a straight kind of sales approach where you're checking in 90 days, you're seeing how things are going. Maybe you don't know what necessarily the company does or anything like that, but if they're using the product or not. It can't just be all sort of inward facing. It has to be from the customer's perspective too.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I was listening to what you guys just said, you know, I'm synthesizing what you're saying with my own experience, and then a lot of experiences I have speaking with a lot of people in the industry. This is episode 19, but we've actually been doing this, these calls since over a year ago. So they weren't in this format. So just even these calls and revisiting this topic, which we have multiple times, um, it's interesting because we've arrived at a place where the consensus of, hey, customer success managers need to be, revenue driven. They need to have some sort of commercial responsibility they can tie back to. If you're on the other side of that argument, hey, don't give up the fight. You're just on the losing side for right now. But maybe the title change in 2 years when everyone's tired of being spammed by their account managers asking for renewal increases every 3 months. But until then, that's the world we're in. So when Ryan was saying like, hey, you have an you have an account executive who is like the main commercial person, right, at Okta, there usually is this, and what I would describe it as, like, if the KPIs of the customer, meaning the reason they signed up with you, if that thread is lost within whatever organization you have, they're not going to be successful, because the way that shows up in the real world is marketing has their own KPIs, which is like, open rate, their own things that they're trying to optimize for. I mean, if you ask the customer, like, do you care about open rate on your emails? They're like, no. Where did that come from? Right. So what you tend to find is, or CSMs, it's just like, hey, we really care about, and it's not even that these things don't matter, like first time to value or onboarding survey. But the thing is, if people start losing what the main jobs to be done from the customer standpoint is, right? And if that's not constantly being revisited and that's the central focus, especially as you see in all the conversations I've talked to in these bigger companies, there tends to be a breakdown of, the go-to-market team, because there's just, we get sucked into our own, we'll say, vertical or silo metrics that our silo leaders want to see. My VP of CS, my VP of marketing, my VP of sales, they want to see these other metrics. And meanwhile, the customer's over there holding the bag with their original, like, two things they really wanted. And
Yeah.
then people are shocked when they cancel. I mean, did I get that wrong?
No, I
don't
think
think you got it wrong at all. I think that's exactly right. I've walked into a few places and I've asked them, like, I've asked my new CSMs, tell me what your customer goal is, their goals for the year. They have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't even thought about asking that question. And that's, if you don't know that, you can't renew them because they're not happy with what they didn't meet their goals. They're not going to stay.
Right.
And they don't ask that. That's not a question that's taught very often.
I think
Right.
there's two aspects to what you brought up there, Brad. Like I call them nested goals. The team in general for go to market has to have you have to have an overarching goal of what you're looking to accomplish. And I'm a big believer in you have to have one owner of those things, but that doesn't mean that the sub goals to that overall thing that you need to accomplish shouldn't have a different owner than just that one person that's at the top of that top line goal. So, if people roll up all through a CRO and the CRO owns all revenue, that doesn't mean that the CRO is responsible for every little nuance. You need to know how to stack them so that they work with your process in which you're working with the customer. To your point then, though, about the working with the customer and understanding the customer value, I think we as companies get really caught up in marketing the language that we like to use. Like we've done research on our area, and we've now taken the average of everything we've read and heard to build out these value drivers, in my language, that we think are relevant to our customers. And then when we talk to the customer, we try to bucket them into those things that we used for marketing instead of continuing to capture them in the customer's language. And the customer's language might not fit into any of those, but they might still be a good customer for us. So there's an element of taking the data we learn from the customers and the things that they value. And then there's also the thing of bucketing that into how we market to attract the 80 to 90% of companies that are going to come towards us and work with us and want to buy our products and services. I've talked to a lot of customers too still, and they're like, yeah, those sound good, right? The marketing language sounds good to them because they're not really even sure how to measure these things because they've never been asked to do it before, or they didn't have a specific goal, but they needed to change out the technology they were using before because it was no longer adequate or it was costing them too much. So there's that process of educating them if they want it, but there's also the process of knowing what they really care about and wanting to accomplish to get out of it.
Yeah. Like asking them what keeps them awake at night and seeing if that has anything to do with what your website, what your homepage is offering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's kind of what I meant, where it's just getting back to the core jobs to be done, right? So I know I've talked about that a lot over my time, but the jobs to be done theory, or jobs theory, Clay Christensen, who came up with the theory, he was working as a consultant for McDonald's, and he found out a milkshake has at least two jobs. One is for parents to make it feel like they're a good parent when their kid says, "Daddy, take me to McDonald's, buy me a milkshake." And then for commuters in the morning who are stuck in traffic, so that they could have something to do when they're drinking their milkshake. And so they can adjust the viscosity or the thickness of the milkshake, make it thinner, in the evening so that kids can not take all day to drink their milkshake, and then make it thicker in the morning so it lasts longer. And so a lot of times it's just interesting because when I've talked to, leaders and just talking to people, I just say, well, is your product more complex than a milkshake? Can it do more jobs than a milkshake? And then most of them are like, yeah, it does. And I think that's what we kind of get away from is these go-to-market teams, is that, the level of complexity as we bring more people in under the umbrella, we can kind of lose focus of that, what those core jobs are, right? Which to them might be, I want to feel like a good parent, or I want to fill my commute when I'm bored. And
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think it's like the CEOs and senior leadership's responsibility to get that, and I think some do and some don't. I think the anti-pattern that I've seen is where you have a KPI and you forget, like you don't take into account that initial engagement and adoption of the product, like they each have their own touch points and ways to maximize that, and they're what determine the ultimate KPIs at the end.
right.
And so I've seen people bring in like sales teams who are very much super skilled at what they did and could probably grow a contract much better than like the average CSM would. But the irony is, like, the more sales focused they became and aligned on measuring that one single KPI, the worse churn got, because everything prior to that was neglected.
Yeah, so that's super interesting, Scott, because in this whole AI conversation, people talk about we wouldn't be surprised if we see our first billionaire like one person company, because AI, they can clone websites, clone all types of things, right? So I think, and you start seeing this, especially in the job market now, where teams are much more like agile and they have people trying to use tools to make people more efficient. But at the same time, it's we still have to remain what the main goal is, and like that gets carried away so often. Let's transition though, because I'm looking at time, and I do want to ask some specific questions, because I have somebody that I coach. Okay, this person is an account manager. Okay, so they're in the go-to-market team, and I want to put this question for all three of you and see what feedback you have. But this person's been working at their job for a year. They were brought in to help right size a lot of these contracts. So think companies haven't had any price increases in 6 years. So in 2024, someone's hired at the beginning of the year. They have a whole portfolio. They just work through it all. And then now this person is being approached saying, hey, I know we just got them a price increase of 40% last year. We need to go back to them and say, we got to get an extra 20%. How would you respond to that person? So I have the way that I would respond, but I'm just curious, because a lot of people are kind of facing this in the CS kind of renewal space, if they're managing renewals. So if you want to expand the question, how do you keep going back at renewal time? And then there's always larger than expected renewals. What's successful, what's not? Whoever wants to go first, just launch right in.
Oh, that's a tough question.
I'll start with it. It definitely depends on the pain you're solving. So 6 years is a long time to go without justifying value that your customers are potentially getting from your product.
Right.
If they stuck around enough to pay 40% extra, and if that's for the same exact products and services that they were getting before, you're obviously solving a pain there, right? And they don't know another solution that's going to solve it for cheaper. The 20% extra, I would ask, are you applying that or tying that to other products and services that you're selling them? Are there new offerings that you can incorporate into it, that you've matured as a business that now you're adding into the portfolio?
Right.
Those are the things that I would really think about or do you still stand true? Are you the top player in the industry? You're providing that company immense value, and maybe you should be talking about, are you replacing some other technology within their organization? The place I wanted to leave the last conversation was, you need to understand your customer's pain that they have. And that goes wider than what your product, what your known product solves. Right? You want to understand their business inside and out and everything that they have going on. So I think if you ask them questions to understand their problems, what's going on, where are you spending the most amount of your time, or where are your team spending the most amount of time, whether it applies to your product or not, at the end of the day, at least you have a better understanding of that person's job and role and the way they're thinking about how they do their job and function within their company. But you have to understand that company to apply a value approach to what you're selling to them. So I think the situation depends if you're incorporating new products or services. I also think it depends on your competition in the market. And lastly, what are the other pains that you could potentially solve for that customer, where you could expand your market share within that business to justify the additional spend?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to have an emotional reaction to that scenario, but like Ryan said, there's almost like two dimensions. There's one dimension where the CRO or CEO is being completely unrealistic and just demanding more revenue to hit a target, which exists. But there's also the fact that the product is really just, there's a whole lot more value in there that they're getting out of it, and it's undersold, to some extent. So I think that a CSM needs to understand that and kind of have the, I think one of the early challenges with bringing technical teams into like the renewal process is that sort of mixed emotions about talking about commercial aspects as well as, technical enablement. But I think that, that's part of the conversation, is getting past that and realizing that, this is a shared commitment to create value together, and that value is worth something, and getting good at that. Like for me, it was just a switch that it was uncomfortable until it wasn't. And then I was like, oh, I can help grow my own company. And that's a good thing too, but it is like in the customer success mindset, like it also doesn't mean that that if it doesn't happen, like my role in this is to bring back the feedback of why it's not happening. Like if the extra 20% after the 40% increase isn't happening, here's why it's not happening. And that's what good salespeople are good at doing anyway.
Right.
No, I think you both hit the nail on the head, right? Like, are we providing the right value for the extra 20%? Is there any reason to do it other than, as Scott said, we just want more money? I think that's not a good enough reason. But it is a reason that comes out a lot. And how do you phrase that? And that's a tough question. I guess you have to know what the client's KPIs are for themselves. Are we meeting that? It goes back to the other question, right? We don't know. If we're not meeting their needs, then me coming back and asking for 20% again is going to automatically cause churn immediately.
Right.
So it all boils down to, again, are we meeting their KPIs? And if we are, we can justify the increase in expenditure if we need to.
Yeah. I have like radical takes when it comes to customer success. Like, here's the box. I'm like sitting over here in my chair all by myself. Like, I'm not even sure. There are companies that are quote unquote customer first that are public companies, but there's so few that like I can name them on two hands, right? Like true customer first. But I remember, I won't say who it was, I don't want to embarrass them, but I was at a conference. This person's really well known in the customer success space. They were going up an escalator. They shouted down at me, "Hey," blah, blah. And they're like, I said, "I got a question for you. Can public companies truly be customer first?" And they're sitting there thinking, and they say, "I don't know." They just shut it down because of this straight challenge, right? And what I'm like, it's just an observation, which is products developing something, right? It's doing some job, but suppose you have that, you know, you have a customer who's completely happy with what they have. They want to stay. They'll pay, let's say, an inflation rate price increase, but they don't want to pay the 20% there for something they don't want to get tagged on, right? So then you either have the blunt force, you got to sell them and convince them, right? Or then you take the L and then you potentially lose your job because you're not hitting your quota, you're not doing this. And then, so I think there's so many variables, and it's based off of incentives. Like if you have public companies where the incentive is every quarter, we got to call Wall Street, and then they have to tell us what we want is the 4-letter word, more, right? So if you're always looking at more, eventually that's why you get to a point where there's a contraction, because there's literally like everyone's TAM is only so much. Like you can try to open up other TAMs, but at the same time, opening up other TAMs doesn't happen in a quarter. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. So that's my question of what is customer success in the go-to-market strategy, right? So should they have Should they own a renewal? Should they be commercial? Right? Or to quote Jason Lemkins, who is the founder of SaaStr, this time last year on his podcast, he was just like, Nick Meta was on, and he said, "Hey Nick, can I get some more customer success and less sales?" Because he was just talking about every time the CS person's reaching out, they're always trying to sell me something. So that's the season we're in. But the whole helping customers be successful, help them achieve their outcomes, seems like everyone's trying to go for the revenue. Is that going to swing back eventually when people get tired of trying to be sold every quarter? Or is that going to be here to stay? What's customer success's prognostication going forward? What do you think?
I've learned that it's I've learned that optimism doesn't always work out the best for me. Like having an optimistic attitude that it's all going to work out. Like I've learned my lesson there. So I do think that bigger businesses, like some businesses, if you look at, I don't know, if you look at airlines, like there are airlines that I fly. Like I lived in Japan, and like customer service is important. And so when we just booked a flight back to Japan, and the way that we look at it is like, okay, if we're going to fly on United, because United and ANA are code sharing, and if we're going to fly on United, we probably want to get at least premium economy, because economy sucks. And so we try if we can afford it. On the way back, though, if we're flying ANA back, we're like, economy's fine because it's awesome, you know? And so I think that the companies that have the foresight and the values are going to do it right. But in tech and in SaaS and in weird economic times, probably the companies that are going to try a bunch of different stuff that's going to be kind of rough and painful is higher than normal, you know? And I think that that's probably for CSMs that are looking, and there's a lot out there. Like, I think, you know, finding safe harbor is finding those companies that do think about, you know, oh, it's not just revenue, it's adoption that leads to revenue, you know, and it's delivering outcomes that leads to revenue is where you can really, you know, make a change and have a satisfying career, you know?
Yeah, it's like measuring the throughputs, right? Like if I'm trying to lose weight, I don't need to necessarily weigh myself if I know I'm always going to be running 3 miles a day and eating clean, right? You're just, if you know that you're doing those 3 things, the result will take care of itself. Is that kind of what you mean, Scott?
Yeah. Or what I do,
Okay.
I weigh myself right after I run, and it's awesome, you know, because I've
There
lost
you
like
go.
3 pounds of water weight, and then I just don't weigh myself again until I run again. So I can keep that fake weight down, even though, you know, I eat cookies or sandwiches after.
A man after my own heart. I like it.
Brad, I have a couple different things in that. You know, you mentioned earlier, can a public company do customer success well, the right way, however you want to position it? You know, I think they're very capable of doing customer success the right way and well positioned. But I'd say only probably about 2% companies overall know what that looks like, right? And I think a lot of people,
I agree.
I think a lot of people have never seen good. And when you see good, you have a hard time understanding any other way to do it.
Yep.
But when you see good, you also have to remember that there's a commercials element to it. You know, what is the product and service you're selling? How much money are you bringing in per product? How many people does it take to get that product sold? And, you know, what's your cost of acquisition? You know, what's your payback period? What's your efficiency costs over time of taking care of those customers? So like you have to weigh the efficiency elements and the financial elements to understand, are you even capable of doing good CS? Or do you really have to start from some kind of like rudimentary digital approach or do you have to raise your prices? And does your price justification even fit? Like, product market fit is great if people are using it, but if the price point doesn't justify the resources you need to throw at it, is it a product change that's necessary? Is it a market shifted change? Is it your go-to-market approach? There are a lot of different elements that go into that about how to set it up the right way. And if you're even in a situation where it can be set up the right way. And these are the types of questions that if I were like interviewing with a company, like I'd be asking those types of things, like what's your viability? What are your ratios? What's your cost of acquisition? Like those are really important financial metrics for somebody to understand what are they walking into when they get into those jobs. I'll close with the real question though, which is I do think that there's a shift towards commercials right now. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people have been trained on how to do that. So like, have they been trained on how to run a proper sales process? Have they been trained on how to run a proper renewals process? Do they know sales tactics at all? Have they been through like a force management or anything like that in their careers? A lot of people on the post-sale side have not. And it's because they've been technical resources or they've been relationship managers. And they need to learn a skill that they're just being kind of thrown to the wolves right now. And I think if there's any opportunity, it's either you're going to train those people and invest in them, or you set people up to fail and you need to find resources that have been properly trained on the sales side. And I do think that ends up creating a shift backwards towards CS being way more paramount in the coming years, because you're going to see a bunch of people fail from constantly trying to oversell these customers. Like you asked the question earlier about constantly coming to the table with a contract. Customers are going to get exhausted with that. You can't keep showing up to the table and saying, pay more, pay more, pay more. There's going to be a breaking point. And I think you'll see shifts and wins. I always call it a heartbeat. It goes up and down. But I think we'll see that in the coming years with how things are operating and happening right now.
Yeah. I had a joking conversation with some other people in customer success that really, if I was going to publish a one-page guide for companies on how to lower their SaaS costs, it's literally like, I'm not getting value out of your product, and just come back with that and see how the SaaS company, reacts to that. Because I think that there's some teams that, some from CSM up to the top that really have no way to answer that question and no way to solve those kind of problems.
Yeah. What do you think, Sean?
Kind of the same. I think we're going to stay with the money for a while. Then we're going to stay focused on dollars. That's going to be where we're at. Do I think we should be? Maybe not. It's a component for sure. But I also feel like the understanding the client's needs to come back in full circle, and it's not there where it should be. But I also think it depends on the size of the business we're talking about. I mean, if we're talking about, I'll use Delta. You talk about Delta. Like, if we're talking about an airline, it's a different conversation than a small SaaS company.
Right.
And I think understanding that and looking at the resources and the cost and all of that matters. But for now, all of it's going to be, here's your revenue target, go hit it.
Yeah. I've had revenue targets everywhere that I've gone. Like, there's been some commercial aspect of it, but I think that a lot of people got into customer success through my hundreds of conversations with people to not be in sales, right? They're like, I don't want to be in sales. And now, I'm faced with this new reality of not only am I going to be in sales, but to Ryan's point, what training is being offered. And it's a rough time. Like, people are not okay in the space when it comes to talking to a lot of people. And I think it's okay not to be okay if you're listening to this, because things do change. You still have, your job, you get new responsibilities placed on you all the time. But that's why we try to have these conversations, so that we can get people like Scott, Sean, and Ryan who have experience, who can talk about, things that they've seen. And that's why I feel kind of like the prophet in the wilderness over there. I'm just like over there in my, in my rag sitting on a rock, just being like, you will shift back in 2 years. In 2 years, all your customers will be like, I don't care how long we've been a customer. I'm tired of you people just shaking me down. We're putting out a RFP and we'll go with, player number 3 or 4 because the margin of loss is so small. We'll just deal with it, because in any commercial relationship, people know that you got to continually provide value, but there's a management and all that stuff too. So, well, we are unfortunately at the end of the call. Michael says, love the convo, lots of insight comments, especially Ryan's point on so few companies seeing good customer success. Many need product packaging, pricing, et cetera, invest customers first. Yeah. So, and that was a great point. A lot of people haven't ever seen, what a true example of a high functioning team within a customer success team is, right? And not to go on rants, but what I always tell people is if you're in a leadership position, it's your job to provide clarity. Like if you're in over your head, just admit it, even to yourself right now. I'm leading a CS team. I might not know what I'm doing. Just get help, hire people. I heard Ryan has a company that might be able to help you, right? So just get help. Okay. Just be humble enough to maybe be like, I don't know it all. It's okay to ask for help, and go find the dollars that can help you work things out. So great show. Let's end with, how could people get in contact with you? Anything you want to pitch? Sean, we'll start with you. How can people get in contact with you?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest way. Happy to connect with whoever wants to chat.
Awesome. Where can people find you, Scott? Besides that, are you still doing the meetup in San Fran?
No, I attend. I'm on LinkedIn, and I do the CS consulting, but that's I'm pretty solid there. But I do offer personal and professional coaching, similar to maybe you do, Brad. But I think for folks that are in tech and trying to figure out, exactly how bonkers it is, that's something I might be able to help people with.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Scott.
And everybody can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you are looking to speak to somebody who has a product that can help you solve of capturing your customers' outcomes and actually quantifying them as well, jointly with your customer, that is what we are focused on at Divix. So I would love to speak with you, but regardless of that, one way or another, please feel free to connect with me, and happy to talk. Awesome. Thanks for having us, Brad. This was fantastic. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, panel. And by the way, if you have a free community, free event, you can list it on Success Panda for free. And then if you are a coach or consultant, guess what? We're trying to aggregate together all the people. So feel free to join and list yourself, because people want to find out where you're at. But gentlemen, it's been fun. Great conversation. I'm glad I got to meet you for the first time, guys. And we will see you next week on episode 20. Until then, everyone have a great weekend. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
See ya.